Henry was feeling very sorry for himself. He said to James,
"You know, James, I suffer dreadfully, and no one cares."
James said, "Oh, rubbish, Henry. You don't work hard enough." Henry was bigger than James, but smaller than Gordon. Sometimes he could pull trains very well, but sometimes he had no strength at all. The Fat Controller spoke to him.
"You're too expensive, Henry. You've had lots of new parts and new paint too, but they've done you no good. If we can't make you better, well, we must get another engine instead of you. Sorry."
This made Henry, his driver, and his fireman very sad. The Fat Controller was waiting when Henry came to the platform. He had taken off his hat and coat and put on overalls. He climbed to the footplate and Henry started. Henry's fireman said, "You know, sir, Henry is a bad steamer. I build up his fire, but it doesn't give enough heat." Henry tried very hard, but it was no good. He had not enough steam, and they stopped outside Edward's station. Henry was very upset. He said,
"I shall have to go away."
So Edward took charge of the train and Henry stopped behind. The Fat Controller said to the fireman,
"Look here, what do you think is wrong with Henry,
"Well, sir, if you don't mind my saying so, the coal is wrong. We've had a poor lot lately, and today it's worse. The other engines can manage. They've got big fireboxes, but Henry's is small and can't make the heat. Now, with Welsh coal, he'd be different, see?"
"Oh, Welsh coal, eh? Well, it's expensive, but Henry must have a fair chance. James shall go and fetch some Welsh coal."
When the Welsh coal came, Henry's driver and fireman were excited.
"Hey, this is fine now. We'll show them, Henry, old fellow, hey!"
And they carefully oiled all his joints and polished his brass till it shone like gold. Henry's fire had already been lit, so the fireman made it carefully. He put large lumps of coal like a wall round the outside. Then he covered the glowing middle part with smaller lumps. Henry said,
"Hey, you're spoiling my fire."
"No, we're not, Henry. You wait and see. We'll have a roaring fire just when we want it." And he was right. When Henry reached the platform, the water was boiling nicely, and he had to let off steam to show how happy he was. He made such a noise that the Fat Controller came out to see him.
"Hello, Henry. How are you,
"Oh, I feel fine, thank you, sir. Fine, oh, fine."
"Well done, Henry. Have you got a good fire, driver?" "Never better, sir. And plenty of steam." "Good. Well, no record breaking now, and don't push Henry too hard." "Bless you, sir. Henry don't need any pushing. I'll have to hold him back."
And off they went. Henry had a lovely day. He had never felt so well in all his life. He wanted to go fast, but his driver wouldn't let him.
Steady, old fella. Steady now, Henry. There's plenty of time.
They arrived early at the junction, and not long afterwards Thomas came puffing in. Henry said,
Hello, lazy bones. Where have you been? I can't wait for dawdling tank engines like you. Goodbye.
Thomas was astonished. He said to Annie and Clarabelle as Henry disappeared, Whoa! Wow! Have you ever seen anything like it? And both Annie and Clarabelle agreed that they never had.
Buffer bashing. Winter was passing, but there was still 1 or 2 late frosts, which made everything look sugar-coated and sparkling in the spring sunshine. Each morning, Donald and Douglas took it in turns to bring a ballast train from the small railway, and James then pulled the trucks to a place where the line was being mended. One morning, Donald was uncoupled and ran ahead into a short siding to let James take his place at the front of the trucks. But a hard frost had made the rails icy. When Donald tried to stop, his wheels locked and they slid on the ice. Before he could say "Fat controller," he hit the buffers at the end of the siding. The buffers stopped him. That was what they were there for, but they were badly damaged. Donald was lucky. He wasn't hurt at all, just embarrassed. The other engines teased him. "You should go in for the skating championships," they said. Even Donald laughed, though he was worried about what the Fat Controller might say. But the Fat Controller only warned him to be more careful. He knew it hadn't been Donald's fault. The next day, the men were sent to mend the buffers. At last, James's repair work on the line was ending. "Tomorrow's train, Douglas, will be the last for the time being," the Fat Controller told him. The next day, as Douglas drew his loaded trucks to a halt in their siding, James was waiting. "Here you are, James," Douglas said cheerfully. "What are you going to do now that this job's finishing?" "Pull some passenger trains, I hope," replied James. "I'm getting tired of doing the same thing all the time." "Never mind," said Douglas. "Today's the last one." His fireman uncoupled the trucks and climbed back into the cab. Then Douglas puffed slowly into the short siding. At the end of the siding, the men who had been mending the buffers were standing to one side. They had pots of paint beside them and had just finished painting the buffer bar bright red. "That looks very smart," thought Douglas. "Much better than it did before. The Fat Controller's probably glad that Donald smashed it up." His driver put on the brakes. Nothing happened. The driver tried again. Still nothing. "Horrors!" exclaimed Douglas. "I can't stop!" The workmen watched in dismay. Douglas rolled steadily along the line and smashed to splinters the buffers they had just spent 3 days mending. "Ouch!" exclaimed Douglas, opening his eyes cautiously. "Oh, that hurt!" The new buffers had stopped him, but unfortunately Douglas had been moving faster than Donald. He was in a terrible mess. His front was badly bent, and he was smeared with bright red, which hadn't had time to dry. "You silly great engine!" scolded the foreman, waving his paintbrush angrily. It still had red paint on it, and some of the paint flew out and stuck on Donald's nose. 3 days' work," the foreman said crossly, "and in 3 seconds you come and smash it all to pieces." Douglas's front wheels were off the rails, so James had to come and rescue him. Later, the Fat Controller spoke sternly to Douglas about engines not taking care in sidings, and the red paint was left on Douglas's nose. That's a reminder.
Who does Peter Sam think he is? Grumbled Sir Handel. He goes gallivanting off to Wales, and when our new engine isn't ready, he's brought back. We can manage without him. We're short engines until the next one is ready, said Skarloey. It's sensible to have him back. Huh, snorted Sir Handel rudely. If he's too puffed up in the smoke box, I know what I shall do. When the Fin Controller told Peter Sam to rest after his journey, Sir Handel was not pleased. What's the good of coming home just to laze about all day? Sir Handel grunted. He bumped his coaches crossly. Near the shed, he thought he saw Peter Sam grinning at him. Right, he muttered. That's it. His wheels hit a rough rail joint. There was a crack and a clatter, and the driver stopped him quickly. That's your day done, he said. Your fire bars have collapsed, and your fire has fallen out. Sir Handel chuckled to himself. His plan was working well. Rusty was the only engine available, and quickly he took Sir Handel's train, and the Fin Controller came to see Peter Sam. Sorry to spoil your rest, he said, but I'm afraid you'll have to take Sir Handel's next train. Some of Sir Handel's fire was rescued and put into Peter Sam's firebox. As soon as Peter Sam could move, he pushed Sir Handel into the shed. Sir Handel didn't help at all. He just smirked to himself in the darkness. That'll teach them, he thought. Days passed, but no one came to mend Sir Handel. Visitors thronged to see Peter Sam now that he was back, and everyone else was busy. Oh dear, thought Sir Handel sadly. I didn't bargain for this. He grew cold and his paint became dull. The cleaners were much too busy making sure the working engines looked smart to worry about Sir Handel. He heard the men working on the new engine, but they didn't come to see him. They had no time either. One day, Sir Handel heard cheering from the workshop. They must have finished the new engine, he muttered miserably. I wish I could see him. Just then, the door at the back of the shed opened, and Sir Handel heard footsteps. It was the Fin Controller. Hello, he said. Why are you looking so fed up? I'm sorry, sir, said Sir Handel. Whatever for? Asked the Fin Controller. I broke my fire bars on purpose, sir. I want to pay Peter Sam back. The Fin Controller paused. I see, he said. He quickly rethought what he had been going to say. Well, Sir Handel, he said sternly, thank you for owning up. If you'll promise to behave yourself, you shall be mended. Oh, yes, sir, I will, sir. Very well, said the Fin Controller gravely. Later that day, Sir Handel was given a new set of fire bars. No one ever told him that the special sort, which he'd always used to, had only been delivered that morning.
Dirty water. They cleaned the engines very well on the Talyllyn Railway. More Peter Sam to Cathy and Lizzie. Lizzie was polishing his whistle, and Cathy was cleaning round the windows in front of his cab. Cathy jumped down. If that means you think we don't do it so well here, she said indignantly, I'm going home this minute. Peter Sam smiled. The girl's parents worked on the Talyllyn Railway, and now they were on holiday on the island of Sodor, and had come to see him. I was thinking of when I was ill, Peter Sam said. I took some cleaning then. Remember? Tell us again, cried the girls. Peter Sam took a deep breath. They have funny water on the Talyllyn, he began. What's that got to do with it? Demanded Cathy. Shh, reproved her sister. He won't tell us anything if you keep interrupting. I wasn't. Peter Sam yawned loudly. Have you two finished? He asked. Sorry, Peter Sam, apologised Cathy. I'll be quiet, I promise. Peter Sam paused. As I was saying, he went on, they have funny water on the Talyllyn. The men have to put something special into the tank at the shed to make the water taste nice. Peter Sam smiled to himself. I was feeling quite well, he remembered, until I had my drink, but that day the water tasted awful. I told my driver how horrible it was, but he didn't seem worried. I took my coaches to the station, and the fireman let water into my boiler. Then I really began to have boiler ache. I feel sick, I said. "Do the best you can," said my driver. "We'll have a look at you at the end of the trip." But I never got that far. The green flag waved, and the driver opened my regulator. I went a few inches, and then whoosh! A column of filthy white water sprayed out of my funnel. Peter Sam shuddered. "This awful water splashed all over me," he went on. "It was lucky there weren't any visitors nearby. Ugh! And there I was, covered in this horrible white sludge." Peter Sam shuddered again and closed his eyes. Driver tried to start me again, but the same thing happened. Luckily, Scarlo's twin, Talaclin, was at the station, and he took my train. All I wanted to do was go back to the shed for a rest, but I wasn't allowed to. "Why?" asked Lizzie. Peter Sam paused. "They said that the visitors had come to see me, and would be disappointed if I wasn't there. So I was put on the spare line, and everyone was told I was ill." "But you got well again, didn't you?" said Kathy. "Oh yes," replied Peter Sam. "I was cleaned inside and out, and that was much better. They said someone had used too much of whatever it was they put in the water tank. They do it differently now." "That's right," put in Lizzie. "Dad told me you have to take a pill." "Not a pill," objected her sister. "It's some white stuff that the fireman puts into our tank when we have a drink," said Peter Sam. "Much better. It took ages to clean off the muck that came out of my funnel, and that," he added sternly, "is all I meant when I said they clean engines well on the Talaclin." "Yes, Peter Sam," giggled the girls. "Of course it is."
High Speed Gordon. Donald was excited. "The diesels at Yon works," he announced. "See that on the other railway there are things called high-speed trains. They have a diesel engine on each end and can go at 125 miles an hour. Gordon snorted.
"An engine at each end?" he said scornfully. "There's only one of me, but I bet I can go as fast in those smelly boxes on wheels. Probably faster,"
he added. Gordon was still bragging the next morning.
"Speed's nothing to me," he said. "Why, one of my Doncaster cousins went at 125 miles an hour. I'll show these diesels a thing or two, just you wait and see."
He puffed grandly towards the station. Many visitors came to see the Fat Controller's railway. They often used the express, so it was usually full and heavy. The carriages of the express stood under the cover of the station roof. But when Gordon was coupled to them, his cab and front end stood outside. He grew colder and colder as he waited for the guard to blow his whistle and wave his green flag.
"Come on," he shouted impatiently. "Let's get started."
At long last, Gordon heard the whistle.
"Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on,"
he shouted as he tried to pull away quickly. But his wheels slipped on the icy rails. The sudden movement made water from his boiler surge forward, and Gordon's driver could not shut off the steam. His wheels spun furiously, but neither Gordon nor his train budged an inch.
"Help, help!"
wailed Gordon despairingly. But nobody could. His driver tried every trick he knew. An inspector came and tried some more, but it was no good. The Fat Controller came to see what the fuss was about. He said several things to Gordon, but Gordon was making so much noise that he couldn't hear them. It was a quarter of an hour before Gordon had used up all his steam. Reduced pressure allowed the driver to close the regulator, and with a deep sigh of relief, Gordon felt his wheels stop turning. The silence was amazing. Donald came to take Gordon to the shed, and Henry came to pull the express. The shed was empty. Donald tactfully remembered another job and left Gordon on his own. But that night, Gordon heard a whisper from close by.
"Did you hear it?"
It hissed.
how Gordon went for a spin today? There was a quiet chuckle. Gordon seethed in silence. High-speed engines are all very well, but Gordon should know by now that he's supposed to move his train too. Gordon snorted disgustedly, and with a gasp, the whisper subsided into silence.